International comedian roach.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Dublin, welcome to Ireland, and welcome to Jury's Irish Cabaret. Tonight, somebody's smoking turf. There's a little bit of Irish in everybody, and of course we Irish always enjoy a little joke on ourselves. That's why we live forever. When Irish eyes are smiling, they steal your heart away. And tonight I'm going to try and regale you with the simplicity and unpretentiousness of the humour here in the Emerald Isle. This fella Casey went to the doctor down in County Cork. He said, "Can you give me something for me wind?" And the doctor gave him a kite. Write it down. It's a good one. Write it down. Two fellas in a pub in Belfast talking, and one said to the other, he said, "What's new?" And the other fella said, "There's good news and there's bad news." He said, "What's the bad news?" He said, "The bad news is that the English have landed on the moon." He said, "What's the good news?" He said, "All of them." Oh, dear God. Thank you. I come from Waterford City where the lovely Crystal is made. There was 23 children in our family, and we always put my mother on a pedestal. We had to keep my father away from her. This fella Murphy joined the local dramatic society down in County Cork, and he got a part in a play. He had 2 words to say, "It is." That's all he had to say, and he was delighted. And for 2 weeks he was going around rehearsing, talking to himself. "It is, it is, it is, it is. It is." On the night of the play, he walked onto the stage and he said, "Is it?" This fella Casey was the Irish Evel Knievel, but he was different. Anything everybody else did in the stunts, he wanted to do it in reverse. Even as a child, he was different. When he was 10 years old, he ran away from the circus to join an orphanage. But anyway, different. His last attempt at a stunt was only brilliant. Can you imagine? There was 36 parked motorcycles, and he decided he was going to go over them in a bus. And he would have made it, but halfway over, somebody rang the bell. Write it down. It's a good one. It's a good one. Murphy went to the doctor the other day. He said to the doctor, "What's good for insomnia?" And the doctor said, "A good night's sleep." But anyway, the doctor examined him, and he said to Casey, "I can't seem to find anything wrong with you." He said, "I'll have to put it down to drink." And Casey said, "That's all right." He said, "Doctor, I'll come back another day when you're sober." It's a good one. Anyway, the doctor told him to walk 10 miles a day. And a week goes by and he phoned the doctor. He said, "I'm 200 miles from home. What do I do now?" Simple, God knows. Casey found himself one night in London, by the way, very late, 12:30 at night, and he was down in the underground, the subway station, very late at night. So he walked along to the escalator, and there's a big sign, a big notice on the escalator, and it says, "Dogs must be carried on the escalator." And he said, "My God, where am I going to find a dog at this hour of the night?" I love children's stories as well. I love kids. Oh, yes. This little Catholic boy said to this little Jewish boy, "Our parish priest knows much more than your rabbi." And the Jewish kid said, "Of course he does, because you tell him everything." I like that. His Holiness Pope John Paul, when he came to Ireland, with this great message of peace for all of us, by the way, not only for Ireland, but indeed all the world. But of all the great attributes that this man possesses, strength is one of them. Strength in his face, but also his great sense of humour. I don't think we'll ever forget his great sense of humour here in Ireland. I understand that when he went to Maynooth, to the college, all the religious were lining up to be introduced to him, and there was a little discussion, about feasibility or even imagination as to what nationality our Lord could also have been, just as a bit of fun. Some of the cardinals and the priest said he could have been French, he could have been Italian, he could have been, he could have been Polish, he could have been anything. So they decided that they'd ask the Pope himself. I mean, after all, he is infallible. So when His Holiness came in, they said, "Your Holiness, we're just as a bit of fun discussing the possibility of what nationality our Lord really might have been." And the Pope said he was Irish. And they said, how do you make out he was Irish? And the Pope said, well, who else would be 33, single, and living with his mother? Lovely. In America, you call it the welfare. In Ireland, it's the labour exchange. Same thing. Visualise the scene. The clerk is sitting behind the desk interviewing Murphy, who was applying for some assistance. Now, the clerk said, Mr. Murphy, tell me something about your assets. What visible means of support do you have at the moment? Are you enjoying? And Murphy said, I have 500,000 shares in the Texaco Oil Company doing well. I have 300,000 shares in Guinness's brewery booming, and lots of stocks and bonds and all that sort of thing. And the clerk said, good. Do you have a house? And Murphy said, I have 4 houses, fully furnished and paid for on the outskirts of Dublin. And the clerk said, good. Have you got a car? And Murphy said, I have a new Mercedes-Benz outside the door. And the clerk said, you're joking. And Murphy said, well, you started it. Donegal. You know, people live to great ages in Donegal. Some of them 105 years old, 110 years old. My God, we'll have to shoot them all. We will. They live to this great age because of the fresh air up there. The lovely fresh air in Donegal. It's so invigorating that the caretaker of the local graveyard has to go around every morning with a big stick. Come on, lie down there, boys. Come on now, lie down, lie down. We Irish, though, we have a great sense of humour, but we're as cute as the devil, you know that. We always were cute. We could buy and sell you, honest to God. Well, I'll tell you, Henry Ford's parents were born in Ireland. Did you know that, down in Cork? And many years ago, Henry Ford came to visit the birthplace of his parents in County Cork, and when the lads in the town heard he was in town, they weren't missing a chance like that. So they all converged on the hotel. And they said, Mr. Henry Ford, we welcome you to the birthplace of your parents here in Cork. He said, you are the world's greatest inventor, the world's greatest industrialist, the world's greatest philanthropist, and we welcome you here to Ireland. He said, by the way, we're starting to build a new hospital here in the city, and we thought in honour of your parents you'd like to make a donation to the hospital. So Henry Ford said, of course, and he sat down and he wrote out a cheque for £5,000. The next day, in the Cork papers, the newspapers read, headlines, Henry Ford donates £50,000 to the new hospital. Of course, the lads converged on him that evening again and said, we apologise about the mistake in the newspaper, but tomorrow morning we'll have it rectified back to the 5,000. Oh, we're as cute as the devil. So Henry Ford said, wait a minute. He said, how much is this hospital costing? And they said £50,000. So he said, give me back the cheque. So he took back the cheque, tore it up. He wrote a new cheque for £50,000. And he said, I'll give you this cheque under one condition, that the inscription over the hospital will be the one I have in mind. They said they didn't care what inscription it was. And if you go to Cork, ladies and gentlemen, you can still see it today, and it reads, I came among you and you took me in. Write it down. You're lovely people, you're lovely people. Casey went to the dentist last week. He said, I'm very worried. All my teeth are turning yellow. What can I do? And the dentist said, wear a brown tie. Tie. I like it. Murphy went to the bank to have a cheque cashed. And the teller said, can you identify yourself? And Murphy took a mirror from his pocket, looked at it and said, yes, it's definitely me. But we Irish, as I say, like a little laugh at ourselves. A lot of nonsense talk today about ethnic humour. There's nothing wrong with ethnic humour if you can enjoy a little joke on yourselves, in good taste, of course. We Irish will live forever because of our sense of humour. I went to Niagara Falls, by the way, very spectacular, when I was playing in Buffalo, New York. This Irish plumber, looking at Niagara Falls, he said, I think I can fix this. But one of the funniest little jokes I've heard in Ireland in a little village for a long time is Murphy and the husband, they bought a little house, you see, and it was near the railway station, but it was very noisy, particularly when the trains were going by. The house used to shake a lot. So one day the landlord visited the house, and Mrs. Murphy was trying to explain to him they were going through a bad time with this train business, you see. Now she said, sometimes when I'm in bed and the train goes by, it nearly knocks me out of the bed. So the landlord said, now, you've got to be exaggerating here. I know now it's not good, but it can't be that bad. Well, she said, I'm telling you now, there's a train due any minute, she says, and I'm going to lie on the bed and you'll see for yourself. As a matter of fact, she said, now, why don't you just lie down here beside me and then you'll experience what I'm trying to tell you. So the landlord lay down beside her, and didn't Murphy walk in the door? He said, what's going on here? And the landlord said, you won't believe this, but we're waiting for a train. Oh, for God's sake, write it down. It's a good one. It's not a sin to laugh at that, honestly. It's only a sin if you take pleasure in it. There were three fellas, an Englishman, a Scotsman, and an Irish fella, and they're trying to get into the Olympic Games without a ticket. The Englishman's name is Bentley, the Scottish fella's name is McGregor, and your man from Ireland is Murphy, as usual. So the Englishman conceives a brilliant idea to get in without a ticket. There's a big wooden pole lying on the ground beside him, and he picked it up under his arm, and he blatantly walked up to the gate and he said, Bentley, England, pole vaulting. And they let him in. The Scotsman picked up a manhole cover from the street under his arm, walked up and said, McGregor, Scotland, discus. And they let him in. There's a roll of barbed wire lying on the ground. And Murphy picked it up under his arm and he walked up and he said, Murphy, Ireland, fencing. I love you all. You're lovely. Simple little Irish stories, aren't they gorgeous? They really are. Murphy opened a pub on the moon, but it wasn't very successful. There was no atmosphere. This fella O'Brien, by the way, was very nervous, and he always slept with a gun under his pillow. And one night he heard a noise at the foot of the bed, and he fired, and he blew his big toe off. He said, thank God I wasn't sleeping at that end of the bed, or I'd blown my brains out. Simple, isn't it? It is. Of course, bingo is becoming very popular in Ireland now, the bingo games, you see, but we have it licked here, you see. We call out the numbers in Latin so that the Protestants can't win. We got it all together here, we really do. I was playing bingo one night with Casey, and as the game went on, he kept looking over my shoulder, and when the fella called out 3 and 3, 33, he said, you have that. And as it went on, he said, 4 and 5, 50, for 45, you have that. I said, why don't you mark your own card? He said, I can't, it's full. An American lady met Murphy in a pub there one night. She says, is it true if you kiss the Blarney Stone, you're gifted, you get, endowed with a gift of eloquence? Well, he said, I believe if you kiss somebody that has kissed the Blarney Stone, that's better. So she put her arms around him and gave him a huge, big hug and a kiss. He said, I haven't, personally kissed the Blarney Stone. He said, but I've sat on it. It's not a sin to laugh at that, honest to God. It's only a sin if you take pleasure in it. Now listen. Casey went to the doctor complaining with pains in his chest, and the doctor said to him, you'll have to sleep out in the open, so he joined the police force. The first day he was on duty and a big truck came along and he walked into the middle of the road. He said, stop and don't move as well. And it was Murphy. So he said to Murphy, have you got a driving license? And Murphy said, I have. He said, good. He says, because if you didn't have one, I'd want to see it. Anyway, you have to think about that. You'll have to think about that. So he brought him into court. And the judge said, what's the charge? And he said, driving at 30 miles an hour over the speed limit in a built-up area. And the judge said, Murphy, what have you got to say for yourself? And Murphy said, I couldn't have been doing 30 miles an hour. He said, as a matter of fact, he said, I couldn't be doing any more than 20 miles an hour. And now he said that I come to think of it, I was hardly doing 20 because the visibility was bad. He said, I'm sure, he said, I couldn't have been doing any more than 10 miles an hour. And the judge said, stop the case before this man backs into somebody and kills them. Oh, dear. This is a special little piece that gives me great joy and happiness to do. It's about a little girl. My own little girl, her name is Grania, and every time I do this little piece, I think about her. I'm sure that everybody here tonight that has a little girl will see her in these words, because children are the same all over the world. And it's simply called, What is a Little Girl? Little girls are the nicest things that happen to people. They're born with a little bit of angel shine about them. And even though sometimes it wears a little bit thin, there's always enough left to lasso and capture your heart. Even when she's sitting in the mud or crying temperamental tears or parading up and down the street in mother's best clothes, a little girl can be sweeter, badder, oftener than anyone else in the world. She can run around, stamp, make funny noises that frazzle your nerves. And yet when you open your mouth, she stands there demure with that special look in her eyes. A little girl is innocence playing in the mud, beauty standing on its head, and motherhood dragging a doll by the foot. Girls are available in 5 colors: black, white, red, yellow, and brown. But somehow Mother Nature always seems to know your favorite color whenever you place your order. They disprove the law of supply and demand, for there are millions of little girls, and yet each one is as precious as rubies. God borrowed from many strange creatures to create a little girl. He took the song of a bird, the squeal of a pig, the stubbornness of a mule, the antics of a monkey, the spryness of a grasshopper, the curiosity of a cat, the slyness of a fox, and the softness of a kitten. And then he added the mysterious mind of a woman. Little girls like new shoes, party dresses, noise-making, the girl next door, ice cream, coloring books, dancing lessons, kitchens, cans of water, and one boy. She dislikes visitors, boys in general, large dogs, hand-me-downs, vegetables, or staying in the front garden. She's the noisiest when you're thinking, the prettiest when she has provoked you, and the quietest when you want to show her off. She's the busiest at bedtime, the most flirtatious when she has annoyed you, and must not get the better of you again. Who else could cause you more grief, joy, irritation, satisfaction, embarrassment, and genuine delight than this combination of Eve, Salome, and Florence Nightingale? She can mess up your home, your hair, and your dignity, spend your time, your money, and your temper. And just when your patience is ready to crack, her sunshine peeps through, and you've lost again. She is a nerve-wracking nuisance, just a noisy bundle of mischief. But when your dreams tumble down and the world is a mess, and you seem pretty much of a fool, she can make you a king. When she climbs on your knee, her arms around your neck, and whispers, "Dad, I love you best of all." You know, we Irish have a way with words that belongs to us alone. Do you know that? There's a little bit of Irish, as I say, in all of us. And as I talk to you now, you will recognize your grandparents and your parents and all your aunts and uncles by the way I talk to you now. Do you ever notice when the mother-in-law comes to visit the house, she never addresses the husband personally, always through the wife? She say things like, "Would he like a cup of tea?" Or "Is he going out?" They never talk to you. You're sitting there like a half-boiled Egypt. Honest to God. We do. Also, we say things that aren't necessary. The unnecessary remarks of the Irish, and this is what my album is all about. In the doctor's waiting room the other day, this fella got talking to me, Murphy, and he said to me, "I hope to God," he said, "the doctor finds something wrong with me, because I'd hate to feel this way if I'm well." There was 2 widows, by the way, 2 old widows up in Donegal at Casey's funeral, and one said he went quick. The other one said he did. He went quick, 'twas sudden, 'twas sudden. And the other one said, "Where is he going to be buried?" And the first one said, "In St. Mary's Cemetery." And the other one said, "Well, that's where I want to be buried too, if the good Lord spares me." Simple, God knows it's simple, yes. How many times since you arrived in Ireland have you been sitting in the lobby of a hotel or a restaurant? There's an empty chair like that beside you. You won't be sitting down there 2 minutes when somebody will walk up to you and say, "Is there anybody sitting there?" And you're worse than they are, because you look and you say, I don't think there's anybody sitting there. Now, you talk like that, don't you? Did you ever stop your car in the country in Ireland and ask directions to some place? Did you ever do that? It's a study in itself. Now, let me explain. We Irish are very warm, friendly people, and if somebody stops the car to ask us directions to some village, it makes us feel important. But if we don't know the directions to the place you're looking for, we haven't the heart to tell you. Then if you keep talking to us, we panic and we tell you anything to get rid of you. It happened myself down in County Cork. I was looking for a place called Clonakilty. I said to the farmer, I said, am I on the right road for Clonakilty? He said, you are, but you're going the wrong way. So I said, well, what will I do? Well, he said, if I were you, I wouldn't start from here at all. Suddenly there was a bus passing by and he put up his hand and he stopped the bus. He obviously knew the driver and he went over and started talking to him for 15 minutes, left me standing in the middle of the road. He came back to me and he said, I've just been talking to him, he said, and he doesn't know the way either. But he knows a man who does. We talk that way, honest to God. I met a fella from Galway. I said, is it true if you ask a man from Galway a question, he always answers you with another question? He said, who told you that? Write it down. These lovely little simple unnecessary remarks, and we say them every day in Ireland. I heard my mother, God be good to her, one day saying to my father, what colour do you want the backyard whitewashed? There's a good one. What about that? And another time she said to me, she said, I've lost my reading glasses and I won't be able to look for them till I find them. Isn't it lovely? An American stopped a farmer in Ireland in a big Cadillac and he said, how far is it to Galway? And the farmer said, 6 miles. He said, with a car like that you could do it in 3. It's simple, God knows it's simple. We laugh at ourselves, and why not? Casey went to Spain, by the way, for a holiday, and he got a fantastic suntan, and the day he got back to Dublin he dropped dead. He did. And the wife laid him out in his best suit for the wake. And Mrs. Murphy came in next door and had a look at him. She said, my God, he looks fantastic. He had a great tan. And the widow said, yes. She said, the holiday did him the world of good. And she said, Mrs. Murphy said, he looks so happy and serene. And the widow said, well, of course, she said he's happy because he died in his sleep, you see, and he doesn't know he's dead at all yet, you see. But she said, when he wakes up and finds out that he's dead, she said, the shock will kill him. Write it down. These two fellas, Casey and Flanagan, found themselves in London and they were down and out, the two of them. They were broke. They were passing a restaurant one day. There's a big sign that says, we serve any meal. If you can order a meal we can't serve, you get £100. So Casey said to Flanagan, we'll go in and try it. But Flanagan said, supposing they have what we're looking for, what will we do? And Casey said, we can always wash dishes. Come on, let's go. So they went in, they sat down. This waiter, immaculate, walked up and said, gentlemen, what will you have? And Casey said, we'd like elephant's kidneys on toast. The waiter never flinched. He said, certainly, sir. He went away. 5 minutes later, he came back and he put £100 on the table. He said, you're very lucky. We just ran out of bread. You're lovely people. You're lovely. This fellow Flanagan, by the way, had a lot of money when he was looking for a wife, but he heard that these Spanish women were the most beautiful in the world, so he decided he was going to have a Spanish wife. And he went to a little village in Spain, in Granada, and he inquired as to where he might, be introduced to some pretty Spanish women. He was told they congregate up in the mountains, and they have these little caves where they wait for their suitors to come up to court them. So he said, now when you go up to the little cave, he said, stand outside and give the love sound, the love signal, which is ooh, ooh. And then you hear back, ooh, ooh. And in you go and introduce yourself, and that's it. So he went up into the mountain, he picked out the biggest cave he could find, and he went, ooh, ooh. And the answer came back, ooh, ooh. And he went in, and he was knocked down by a train. There was a knock at the door, and Murphy's wife opened the door. There was a man standing there. He said, I'm collecting for the home for alcoholics. He said, could you give me something? She said, if you come back at 5 o'clock, my husband will be here. You can have him. Write it down. It's a good one. This This fella Flanagan is a taxi driver in New York City, and some time ago outside Kennedy Airport, this very English colonel got into the cab and said, take me to Christ Church in New York. So Flanagan said, hop in, and he took him to St. Patrick's Cathedral. And when they got there, the old colonel said, this is not Christ Church. And Flanagan said, if he's in town, he's in there. That's right. Yeah. Murphy went to Casey's pet shop. He said, I want to buy a canary, but it has to be a wonderful singer. And Casey said, I have just the thing. Just arrived. Fabulous. So he produced this canary, and he began to sing beautifully. And, of course, Flanagan was impressed. He said, that's the one, I'll take that. But just then he noticed the canary had only one leg. So he said to Casey, this canary has only one leg. And Casey said, you want a singer or you want a dancer? What do you want? What about this now for a nice little I love Scots stories. Scottish humour is very like our own. Scots stories. There was 3 Scotsmen at Mass on a Sunday, you see, and the priest during the ceremony, what am I talking about? I'll start that. See, I'm recording this. We'll have to start again. I love Scottish stories. They're very like our own. Now, in church on a Sunday morning, there was 3... You have to do it again, you see. I'm recording it, you see what I mean? So you have to laugh as if you haven't heard it before. Do you understand? I love Scottish stories. They're very like our own. Already applause, and I haven't even told the gag yet. And the 3 of them were in church, you see, and during the sermon... The priest said, now today, he said, I want every one of you to put £5 in the collection plate. Because the 3 Scottish fellas panicked. And then they got an idea. One of them fainted and the other 2 carried him out. Oh, dear God, it's a good one. Write it down. I just got a little note, by the way, to welcome a Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, who are here tonight celebrating their first wedding anniversary here with the 2 children. And we'd like to... Oh, twins, of course. You don't think of that, do you? But we Irish laugh at politics, we laugh at religion, we laugh at anything. This fellow Murphy pulled up in a garage here, by the way, in Dublin one day, and he said to the attendant, fill her up. And the attendant said, we don't sell petrol at all. And he said, a couple of pints of oil. And the attendant said, we don't sell oil either. So the fellow said, what do you do? And the attendant said, we're fronting for the IRA. Well, he said, blow up the tires. That's a good one. Write it down. But you know, you have to laugh, for God's sake. Do you know a story I love, by the way? Now, this happened in Jury's Hotel here. This fellow Flanagan was coming down in the elevator one night with his wife. And there's a beautiful blonde lady in the elevator with him, and he couldn't take his eyes off her. Flanagan kept staring at her. Of course, I think his wife noticed this as well. So when they got down and the elevator doors opened, the blonde just went up and smacked him across the face. She said, I don't like men who pinch my bottom. And she walked off. And Flanagan said to his wife, he said, I swear to God, he said, I never pinched her bottom. And his wife said, I know you didn't, I did. Casey, by the way, went to a parents' meeting of teachers in the local school where his young man attended his son. And he said to the teacher, I've just come along to, find out how the little fella is getting on. And the teacher said, your son is in a class of his own. And your man said, I didn't know he was doing that well. And the teacher said, he's not, but he smells. This fella Casey was working on the roadways, you see. The new thing in Ireland now is the parking meters. They're putting them up all over the place. So, of course, Casey, the foreman, and his gang mates were given the job of erecting 150 parking meters around Dublin. So they got them up on the truck and away they went. They were missing for 2 weeks. And when they came back, they were all dishevelled, all clothes and rags, and they had beards, and they looked terrible. And the parking meters were still on the truck. So the boss says, where the hell have you been and why didn't you do the job? And Casey said, we couldn't find a place to park. Oh, dear God. With the Scotsman here last night at the show, he was here at the show down there, sitting at that table, and I said, what are you doing here in Dublin? And he said, I'm here on my honeymoon, but he was alone. I said, where's your wife? He said, she's back in Scotland. She's been to Dublin before. Oh, dear God. You have to laugh. Laughing's good for you. Casey Casey went to Spain for a holiday. He went into a little restaurant and the waiter came up and he ordered steak and mushrooms, but the waiter couldn't speak English and, of course, Casey couldn't speak Spanish. So he took out a piece of paper and he drew a photograph of a bull and a mushroom and gave it to the waiter. So 10 minutes later, the waiter came back with an umbrella and a ticket for the bullfight. Flanagan was very fond of a drink, and Father Murphy has been trying to get him off the booze for years without success. And one day the priest met Flanagan in the street. He said, Flanagan, he said, you have no idea, he said, how proud I was last night as I stood in the church, in the pulpit, and to see you come through that door after an absence of 3 years and go into that confessional and stay there for 4 hours. And Flanagan said, my God, so that's where I was. It's lovely. Write it down. Flanagan had a mule, by the way. It was a bit wild. One day he attacked his mother-in-law and she died. Hundreds and hundreds turned up for the funeral. And after the service, the priest said, I didn't realize, he said, that your mother-in-law was so popular. Hundreds of men coming to pay tribute to her. And he said, they're not here, he said, to do that. They're here to buy the mule. You know, Murphy had a beautiful garden, and everybody used to admire it, particularly the parish priest. Every time he passed the garden, he'd look at it and say, my God, Murphy, he said, the Lord and yourself are partners. And every morning he'd pass by, he'd say that, and Murphy got a bit fed up. So the next time the priest came by and said, this is a beautiful garden, the Lord and yourself are partners. Murphy said, that may be, Father, he said, but you should have seen this garden when the Lord had it on his own. He was applying for a job in the civil service here in Dublin, by the way, and in the interview, certain fundamental questions they asked you to get an idea of your IQ. So anyway, Casey sat down and the clerk said to him, now, he said, a little test. He said, now, what is made of leather and has 5 fingers? And Casey said, I don't know. So the clerk said, it's a glove. Oh, it's a glove. Why? So the clerk said, what has 10 fingers and is made of leather? And Casey said, I don't know. And the clerk said, 2 gloves. He said, oh, 2 gloves. And he said, finally, the last question is this. He said, what year was Eamon de Valera elected to the presidency of Ireland? And Casey said, would it be 3 gloves? Simple, God knows, it's simple. This fellow Murphy had 2 wooden legs and he had a fire in his house. They saved the house, but he was burned to the ground. He tried to claim from the insurance company. They told him he had the leg. Somebody just sent me up a lovely little joke. You know, we laugh at politics and Ireland, we laugh at religion, we laugh at all sorts. We love to, of course we laugh at religion, we enjoy it. A little story about 4 clergymen who were having a reconciliation session and each was confessing his sins. The first one said he had an addiction to the little drop of the crater, a little drink. He admitted that. And the second one said that he had an urge to steal now and then. And the third clergyman said that he was suffering from envy and so on. And they asked the 4th clergyman what his sin was, and he said, my sin is gossip, and I can't wait to get out of here. I want to read to you, I want to tell you about some Irish toasts. There are some lovely words connected with Irish toasts. A lot of beauty connected with how we toast our visitors here and our own people as well. I'll just tell you a couple of them. Listen to this for a nice little toast. St. Patrick was a gentleman of strategy and strength. He drove the snakes from Ireland. Here's a toast unto his health. But not too many toasts now, lest we forgetting then, forget the good St. Patrick and see the snakes again. Well, that gives me a thirst. That gives me a thirst thinking about it. What about this one? May you have children, and may they grow as mature in taste and health and colour, and as sought after as the contents of this glass. May you have warm words on a cold evening, a full moon on a dark night, and the road downhill all the way to your door. May every hair on your head turn into a candle to light your way to heaven. And may God and His Holy Mother take the harm of the years away from you. May you have no frost on your spuds, no worms on your cabbage, May your goat give plenty of milk. And if you inherit a donkey, may she be in foals. Did you like those? They're nice, they're nice, they're nice. Write it down, you may forget it, write it down. If that happens, you'll regret it, write it down. If you've had a real good time and a drop of vintage wine and the Irish jokes were fine, so write it down. Write it down, write it down, write it down. It's nice to see you smile, write it down. And when laughter fills the air, don't you make it all so rare. Life is better when you care, so write it down. If you're driving home tonight, write it down. Don't give anyone a fright, write it down. Don't go crazy in that car, and don't push the gas too far. Take a taxi if you just, so write it down. Write it down, write it down, write it down. It's nice to see you smile, write it down. And when laughter fills the air, don't you make it all so rare. Life is better when you care, so write it down. Now it's time to say goodnight, write it down. Thank you for being so bright, I'll write it down. Though fate may push and shove you, by the Lord who reigns above you, this is how I really love you, write it down. Write it down, write it down, write it down. It's nice to see you smile, write it down. And when laughter fills the air, don't you make it oh so rare. Life is better when you care, so write it down. Life is better when you care, so write it down. I was in the church the other night, and Father Murphy was in great form in the pulpit. He stood up there, he gave us hell, fire and brimstone, the lot. He frightened the life out of us, he really did. He said, stand up, all those who want to go to heaven. Of course, we all stood up immediately. He said, sit down, and we all sat down. Stand up, all those who want to go to hell. Nobody stood up except Flanagan, in the middle of the church. And Father Murphy said, Flanagan, do you want to go to hell? And Flanagan said, no, Father. He said, but I didn't like to see you standing there by yourself. There's this television program here in Dublin, and it's for children, you see, and they give a special prize, you see, for the best, the most intelligent child on this program. So the MC said, now he said to the children, he said, I want you to tell me who was the greatest man that ever lived. And this little boy stood up and said, he said, Sir, Leonardo da Vinci. And the MC said, a very good answer. He said, he wasn't the greatest man that ever lived. And this other little boy said, please, sir, he said, it was Alexander Graham Bell who invented the telephone. And the MC said, a very good answer, but not quite what I was looking for. And then this little Jewish boy stood up and said, he said, please, sir, the greatest man that ever lived, he said, was St. Patrick. And, of course, the kid won the prize right away. So after the television program, the MC said, rather unusual for a little Jewish boy to say St. Patrick. Why did you say that? And the kid said, he said, well, deep in my heart, he said, I know it was Moses, but business is business. I mean, you got to get it down. I like that. This fellow O'Shaughnessy was a hypochondriac. He was a terrible case altogether. When he died on his tombstone, he had his own epitaph, and it read, now will you believe I'm sick? God between us and all harm, but there's none of us perfect, as you know. Wait till I tell you. This judge here in Dublin was a bit cross-eyed like myself, honest to God, yes. And one day he was in court, and there was 3 fellas standing before him to be sentenced. And with the cross eyes, God help us, you can imagine what would happen. When you hear this, so he was addressing the 3 of them, and he said to the first fella, what's your name? And the second fella answered, Pat Murphy. And the judge says, I wasn't talking to you. And the third fella said, I never opened my mouth. Write it down, it's a good one. Write it down. God knows it's simple. Wait, I tell you, I have a quotation here from the Kerryman newspaper, you know, down in Kerry. You probably heard about the Kerryman that was disqualified from the tug-of-war team for pushing. I like it. This is from the Kerryman newspaper. A supermarket was broken into the other night, and 5,000 cigarettes and 10 dozen heads of lettuce were stolen. The police are now looking for a rabbit with a bad cough. Can you hear me on the mantelpiece over there? You can? Oh, there's the rich people on the shelf. Good evening. Oh, yes, they're all the rich people tonight. Yes, indeed. Did you hear that this fella O'Shaughnessy wanted to be buried at sea, and 4 of the lads were drowned trying to dig the grave? This fella, Murphy, the priest was trying to get him off drink for years, but it was no good. He was drunk out of his mind day and night. And one day he met the priest in the street and he said, Father, what's lumbago? And the priest thought, this is it, I'd frightened the life out of him. He said, that's what you get, he said, when you're out half the night drinking. He said, too much wine, women and song, he said, and staggering and making a general nuisance of yourself. Why do you ask? And your man said, I was reading in the paper this morning that the bishop has it. Oh, I only wish I could be out there with you to hear this. This fellow Murphy was up in court the other day, and the judge said to him, Murphy, you were brought here by 2 police officers. He said, I was, Your Honour. The judge said, drunk, I suppose. He said, yes, Your Honour, they were, the 2 of them. This fellow Murphy went to the barber's last week. He said to the barber, how much is a haircut? The barber said, £3. He said, how much is a shave? He said, £1. He said, right, shave me head. Write it down, it's a good one. Good one, it's a lovely good one. Hello? Up in Donegal one night late, I was trying to get a room for the night, you see, with my chest. But anyway, I have a bad chest. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was knocking at this boarding house in the hills of Donegal. And eventually the woman opened the top window and she called down to me and said, what do you want? I said, can I stay here for the night? She said, yes. And with that, she slammed the window down and left me standing there. Everybody's explaining that to everybody else. Can I stay here for the night? Yes. A lot of people have been admiring this. Now, madam, you're a good judge of jewelry. That diamond I'm wearing, just take a look at that beautiful diamond ring. Isn't it lovely? The story behind that is very interesting. Concerns my mother-in-law. What a woman, drummed out of the Gestapo for cruelty. She's dead. Gone now. At least I hope she's gone. You can't trust them. Before she died, she called me to her bedside. She said, Hal, during my lifetime, I've amassed a great amount of money. She said, and when I'm dead, in remembrance of me, I want you to get a nice stone. Look at that ring. Isn't it beautiful? Beautiful job. Diamond. Lovely. It's a piece of glass, but it looks good. You know, ladies and gentlemen, the show you're watching now has just finished a coast-to-coast tour of the United States and Canada. We did 48 states in 3 months. It was incredible. The traveling was incredible. We were in places like Cody, Wyoming. Have you ever been there? Yes. I slept in Buffalo Bill's bed there. I was in Tucumcari in New Mexico's Pascagoula. I was in Riverton and all over America. It was quite incredible. But New York still has a fascination for me. Yes, it fascinates me that I can survive in the place. But I tell you... It's lovely. I could start a war here tonight, you know that. I'll be running in enough trouble as it is, but however... No, when I tell you, no, honest to God, New York is fascinating. Did you ever notice if you stand still in the streets of New York for 15 seconds, somebody writes on you? Yes. I went to Macy's one day shopping. I said to the lady, I'd like to buy a few things. She said, of course. Do you have a list? I said, no, I always stand like this. List. I bought... Yeah, list. I bought a book in Macy's called How to Be Happy Without Money. It cost $40. I went down to the basement, by the way, and I said to the guy, can you show me the cheapest suit in the store? He says, you're wearing it. On St. Patrick's Day, we were in Buffalo, New York. We crossed over the border to Welland, and we went into to see Niagara Falls. It's quite a sight, isn't it? Did you hear about the Irish plumber looking at Niagara Falls? He said, I think I can fix this. Yeah. Well, it was really terrific over there. I mean, and then, of course, we went to Las Vegas. Very exciting in Las Vegas. I have property there now. 2 of the hotels are holding my bags. Did you hear about the Irish farmer that was awarded the Nobel Prize for being outstanding in his own field? Up in the north of Ireland, in the country, there's a man riding down the road on a donkey and his poor wife walking behind him. Yes, I said, why is your wife walking and you're riding a donkey? And he said, she hasn't got a donkey. That's a good straight answer if you think about it. Any guests here tonight from the Gresham Hotel? The Gresham? Where? Here. Your bus is gone. Two rabbits been chased by a pack of wolves, and one rabbit said to the other, let's get down in this hole and stay there till we outnumber them. The other rabbit said, keep running, I'm your brother. I'll tell you this, we don't... We get many distinguished people to our cabaret over the years here, and since we opened last May, we had Mr. Omar Sharif playing bridge in Dublin here, come to see us. A couple of weeks later, we had Mr. Great American comedian Jackie Gleason. Oh, the greatest. The Honeymooners. Oh, fantastic. We had Mr. Harry Reasoner here, your newsreader from America, with Miss Barbara Walters together. Nobody believes me. They were at the same table, believe it or not. And the famous Hollywood cowboy here 3 weeks ago, we were delighted to see Mr. Gene Autry. Do you remember Gene Autry? A marvellous man. Lovely man. Yes. And Princess Caroline, just before she married, of course, was here with her mother, Princess Grace and Prince Rainier of Monaco. Lovely people. I think last night eclipsed everything for me. A little card came off one of the tables inviting me to join them for a glass of champagne after the show. This is not a hint of any kind, of course, but feel free to please yourselves, of course. I went down to the table and I was introduced to His Majesty King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. And that's what the man said. He said, if you're a comedian, I'm... I used to listen very attentively to my mother and my father talking, because my parents had a certain way of talking. Even at that age, I realized was different to other people. I made a long-playing album about Irish humour. It took me many years to do it, and I devoted most of it to the authenticity of Irish conversation, because we're so different when we talk. It would be a great shame if we ever lost this. And there's a little bit of Irish in everybody. And for the next couple of minutes, as I talk now, you will recall with nostalgia that your parents and your friends and your grandparents used to talk this way. Now, when we talk, we answer the question first, and then we ask it. We do. We say things like, you won't have a drink, will you? Or you're not going out, are you? Do you know what I mean? A woman met me in the lobby tonight. She said, you're not Hal Roach, are you? Do you know what I mean? They talk that way. I love when they walk up to you and they look you straight in the eye and they say, is that yourself? I mean, who else, for God's sake? And I also like when you're walking down the street and somebody recognises you and they say, ha ha, there you are. I love that one. I mean, that's a brilliant deduction, that is. I was sitting at that table one night and a fellow from Galway recognised me. He walked right up to me and he said to me, have you not gone home yet? And him looking at me sitting at the table. But this is the way your parents used to talk. I arrived in the lobby here one night with 2 suitcases, and the porter took my bags and said, Mr. Roach, follow me and I'll be right behind you. That's what he said. We talk like that, honest to God. How many times since you arrived in Ireland have you been sitting in the lobby of a hotel or a restaurant and there's an empty chair like that beside you? Inevitably, somebody will come up to you and say, is there anybody sitting there? Right? I bet it happened today. Did it happen today? It'll happen again tomorrow. All day long. All day long. I met Hennessy the other night, by the way. Pat Hennessy, he's a relation of mine through drink. And I met him in a pub, and I said, I believe you sold your bicycle to Murphy for £30. He said, I did. I said, that was a good price. He said, it was. He said, but if I'd known he wasn't going to pay me, I'd have charged him twice as much. It's lovely the way we talk, it really is. I tell you, I was standing at a bus stop some time ago. There was 25 of us standing at this bus stop. We were waiting for the bus at the time, and you see what I mean? We talked like that, and this fella walked up to me with a classic Irish unnecessary remark. He said, do you know what I'm going to tell you? I was down in Killarney doing a little television show in Killarney, and driving back to Dublin, I came through Killaloo, County Clare, this little village, and I had a thirst in the car you could have photographed, honest to God. I have it again now. I had such a thirst that I went into this pub and had a quick pint of Guinness. It never reached my stomach. My tongue soaked it up. And there's 5 or 6 of the lads in the pub discussing religion, who was what and what was who, and one fella said, well, I'm an atheist, thank God. And the other fella said, there's only one thing wrong about being an atheist, you get no holidays. Oh, write it down, for God's sake, write it down. And I met a taxi driver there from County Cork. I said, is it true if you ask a Corkman a question, he always answers you with another question? He said, who told you that? Anyway, they filmed The Quiet Man up in Mayo in Castle about 27 years ago. I remember it well. John Wayne, Victor McLagan, lovely Maureen O'Hara, and all the lovely people were there. God knows they're nearly all gone now. But recently I was up in Mayo, and there's a little newspaper shop beside Castle, and I went in there to get the newspaper, and this woman recognised me from my television shows, and she said, is that yourself? I said, it is. She said, it's me too. So I said, it's the two of us then. She said, it is. I said, I'm glad. She said, so am I. I thought it was somebody else. This could go on forever. So I said, I'd like the newspaper. She said, yes, would you like today's paper or yesterday's paper? I said, I'd like today's paper. Well, she said, you'll have to come back tomorrow. Oh, dear God, I'll have to lie down for a while. Somebody the directions in Ireland in your car, by the way. Isn't it fantastic? Isn't it fantastic? Recently I was looking for Skibbereen, County Cork, and this is a classic. It's got to be a classic. I stopped this fella and I said, good day to you. He said, good day to yourself. I said, I'm looking for Skibbereen. He said, are you now? I said, I am. But he said, I'll tell you how to get there. I said, thank you. Now he said, here's how you get to Skibbereen. Now listen to this very carefully. Listen to the connotation of words here. He said, now, you'll take the telegraph poles with you for a mile. Just listen to this for a classic. Now, he said, after a mile, you'll drop the poles and turn left. Are you getting this all down now, madam? Write it all down now. I says, and when you turn left, you say, you'll come to a little village, and you think you're in Skibbereen, but you're not. Now, he said, you'll pick up the telegraph poles again, and you'll carry the poles with you for 2 miles. And he said, you'll drop the poles and turn right, and you'll come to a little village, and you'll think you're not in Skibbereen, but you are. Isn't that lovely? Beautiful. It's nice. It's nice. Down in Dingle, County Kerry, they photographed Ryan's daughter. David Lean stayed here for 2 years making that picture. And the storm you saw in that picture, by the way, he waited 11 months to get that, but when he got it beauty. This fella Flanagan is walking down the street in County Kerry in Ballydavid, the lovely beach in Ballydavid, and he's got his front door under his arm. And Casey met him and said, Flanagan, where are you going with the front door? And Flanagan said, I lost the key. And Casey said, well, you had better not lose the door, or you won't be able to get in. And Flanagan said, it doesn't matter, I had left the window open. I'll have to lie down. I really will. The only way you're sure of getting a drink when the pubs close in Ireland is find out who's dead and where they're holding the wake. And you're in for the night. This fella Hennessy went to the wake the other night and he said to the widow, I'm sorry for your trouble. We had a good few drinks. He had a quick look at the corpse and he came back to the widow and he said, I don't think your husband is dead at all. He said, I just saw his eyelashes flickering and his lips moving. And the widow said, well, dead or alive, he goes out of here at 9 o'clock in the morning. Write it down. It's a good one. Now, come on, write it. You gotta write it down. I'll never forget up in Donegal, you see, which is a lovely county. The hospitality of the Irish is unbounding. And I stopped at this little, farmhouse for a drink. Now, they don't give you water. They'll either give you a bowl of buttermilk or a drop of the poteen. Have you ever had the Irish Mountain Dew, the poteen? Great for dandruff. Have you tried it? It would take the paint off the door. But the woman gave me a bowl of buttermilk and I was drinking it and this little pig came up, was nibbling at my shoe. I said, my God, he's a very friendly little pig. She said, why wouldn't he be? You're drinking out of his bowl. I remember the little pig down there. That's a joke, of course. But anyway, talking about the poteen, do you know that it's a sin to make poteen in Ireland? It really is a sin. And this young curate, he came to the village for the first time and I was hearing confessions the first day. And this fellow said, Father, he said, I'm after making 8 gallons of poteen. And the young curate, wasn't familiar with the penance in that parish for this particular offence. So he said, excuse me, and he went into the sacristan and the bishop was half asleep in the chair. And he said, Bishop, I have a fellow out at the confessional and he's after making 8 gallons of poteen. What'll I give him? And the bishop said, give him £2 a gallon and not a penny more. It's a good one. Write it down. It's a good one. We're sitting in the pub having a drink, you see, and this big fella, about 6'4", dashed into the pub and he said, is there a fella here called Rooney? And this little fella like myself stood up and said, I'm Rooney, what about it? And the big fella nearly killed him. He broke 6 of his ribs, broke his nose and gave him 2 black eyes and dashed out of the place. And when he was gone, the little fella picked himself up and said, I sure made a monkey out of him. He said, sure, I'm not Rooney at all. There's a little fella sitting beside me and he said to the bartender, I'd like a bottle of champagne. And the bartender said, of course, what year? He said, I'd like it now. This is the best side over here. Listen, I want a lot of class over here tonight, there really is. Oh yes. My uncle Pat down in Waterford, he reads the death column every morning in the paper and he can't understand how people always die in alphabetical order. And they do, did you notice that? I don't mean to be morose, but I see humour in all things. Laughter is the great valve of life. The world today is beginning to forget how to laugh, which is very sad. We have to bring it back because laughter is so necessary to our well-being. If we don't laugh, we disintegrate and we fade away. So we've got to learn to laugh. It's imperative that we laugh. I see humour in the death columns. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but if you read these in memory of in memoriam, if you change the tone of your voice, they can have a different meaning, a different connotation altogether. Listen to this. In memory of my husband, Seamus O'Shaughnessy, may he rest in peace until we meet again. They're all explaining that all around the room. My wife, by the way, who is a relation of mine by marriage, I don't mind confessing that my wife converted me to religion. I never believed in hell till I married her. Funny woman. She went to the doctor some time ago to have her face lifted again. They said they couldn't do it, so she had her body lowered. Even when we make love, she closes her eyes. She hates to see me enjoying myself. Funny woman. It's not a sin to laugh at that, honest to God. I'm just finishing a book about doctors at the moment, the medical profession men, the funny men, There's a fella sitting beside me waiting to see the doctor, and he's wearing a corset. I said, a corset, yes. I said, how long have you been wearing that? He said, ever since my wife found it in the car. Now, well, God forgive you for taking the wrong meaning out of that. The Father Murphy was here to clear the hall. I went to see the doctor some time ago. I lost my voice and I couldn't talk as well. And I couldn't talk as well. Yes, and I said, doctor, I can't talk. I've lost my voice. He said, now just get into that little room, he said, and get undressed. I'll be right in to examine you. But I said, doctor, it's my throat. He said, don't argue with me. Get in there and get your clothes off immediately. Well, you can't argue with the doctor. And I went into this little room and I got undressed. And there's a fella sitting beside me with nothing on but the radio. I said to him, this is ludicrous. I come here with a sore throat and I finish up with no clothes on. He said to me, you're lucky. I only came here to tune the piano. This, ladies and gentlemen, this gold watch is the most beautiful thing I've ever worn. It chimes the hour. It's 126 years old, and it's got a gold sovereign on the end of it here, 1860. The fob is magnificent. It's got an amethyst stone embedded in it here. It's 120 years. Oh, it's magnificent. I'm proud to wear such a beautiful watch. It was my grandfather's. He was from Scotland, from Glasgow, a fine, upstanding Scotsman. He sold this to me on his deathbed. And I gave him a check. We should digress momentarily from Irish humour and go to Nottingham, to Sherwood Forest, where Robin Hood and his merry men are assembled on a very sad occasion. Robin Hood is dying. He called his faithful servant Friar Tuck to minister to him. He said, Tuck, the end is near. I'm sinking fast. But he said, before I die, I want you to open the windows of this cabin so that I might gaze for the last time on my beloved Sherwood Forest. So they opened all the windows. He said, now, bring me my faithful bow and arrow. And they do. He said, I shall fire my last arrow, and where it lands, that is where I wish to be buried. So they buried him on top of the closet. I met Pat Shanahan the other night in the street, and he was looking very downhearted. I said, what's the matter with you? Well, he said, the other morning I looked out the bedroom window, and he said, I saw this tramp walk up and steal me front gate off the hinges. I said, what did you do? He said, nothing. I was afraid he might take offence. Take offence. She's explaining that to her over there, by the way. The British government have been planning to build a tunnel, a motor tunnel from England to France for the last 80 years, and it's now underway. Now, the British government sent tenders to countries all over the world to get a price to build this fantastic tunnel. Australia said £600 million. Americans said $1,000 million. Germany said £500,000, and they got one offer from Murphy and Son, builders, County Kerry in Ireland, £500. They thought this was ridiculous. So they got Murphy to fly over and he addressed the board, and the chairman said, now, Mr. Murphy, how could you possibly build a tunnel from England to France for £500? And Murphy said, well, he said, you see, there's only myself and the sun. He said, you see, we cut out the middleman. See, that's how we do it. You see, he said, the son goes over to France and starts digging from that side, he said, and I'll start digging from England, he said, and we'll meet in the middle, and there it is. And the chairman said, well, supposing you don't meet in the middle, what happens then? And Murphy said, in that case, you have 2 tunnels for the price of 1. Oh, dear God. Listen. As we go through life, I don't understand how people can be sort of obnoxious and rude to each other. Life seems to be far too short to be like that, ladies and gentlemen. I remember one time here, and you know, I was at a dance, and there's a lady sitting alone, and I think she's lonely. Being a gentleman, I walked up to her, and I said, good evening, would you like to dance with me? She said, no, I'm particular who I dance with. I said, well, I'm not. That's why I asked you. I mean, I tell you, about 2 years ago here, there was flooding in this country for 6 weeks non-stop. You'd never seen anything like the floods. And this little fella Murphy dashed into the pub one day and he said to his pal Casey, he said, your house has just been washed away by the flood tide. And Casey said, it couldn't be. He said, I have the key here in my pocket. This fella Shanahan went to the doctor last week and the doctor examined him, and after half an hour he said to Shanahan, I can't find anything wrong with you. He said, I'll have to put it down to drink. And Shanahan said, that doesn't matter, I'll come back one day when you're sober. This fella Murphy went into the pub the other night. He ordered 6 pints of Guinness, 6 vodka, 6 brandies and 6 lemonades. And the bartender said, would you like a tray? He said, no, I have enough to carry as it is. We all like to help out during the harvest season here, and by the looks of things it won't be that good this year, will it, the harvest? I went to this farm one day and I said to the farmer, could you use me on the land? He said, we have special stuff for that. It's the way you ask them, you see. They don't understand how. It's the way you ask, they don't understand, you see. We laugh at politics, we laugh at religion. It's good to laugh. To see humour in all things is marvellous, though. It really is. I tell you, this fella, this old farmer, you see, up in Donegal, he went to confession and the priest said to him, did you ever sleep with a woman? And he said, I might have dozed off once or twice, father. Now, they're all explaining that around the room here. They really are. This fella, now this is a favourite story of mine. I want you to listen to this very carefully. This fella Murphy, he won £500,000 in the Irish sweepstakes, and he went to Boston, lovely Boston, to see his brother who lived there. Yes, lovely Boston. And on the way back, the plane had an emergency, and the pilot told them they might have to ditch, you see. And of course Murphy thought, my God, he said, I'm after winning £500,000 and I'm going to be killed. So he got down on his knees in the plane. He said, God, he said, if you get me down safely, I'll give you half my fortune. And eventually the plane landed safely, and as Murphy was getting off the plane, this priest walked up to him and said, I couldn't help overhearing your very nice gesture. He said, I'm sure you'd like to start right away to give half your fortune to God. And Murphy said, no. He said, after the plane landed, he said, I made a new deal with God. I told him if I ever went up in a plane again, he could have it all. But we see humour in all things. The wife, the mother-in-law, religion. Of course, the clergy are relenting a little bit now. They're allowing a new pill here in Ireland for the women. You see, it weighs 3 tons. And the women roll it up against the bedroom door and the husbands can't get in. And she's explaining that again here. This fellow Murphy and his wife went shopping in Dublin to a big supermarket, and they had the baby in the pram, you see, and they left the baby in the pram outside the supermarket, and they went in and got the groceries. And when they came out, they got the baby in the pram, and they're walking away about 100 yards, and the wife got hysterical. My God, she said, Pat, we have the wrong baby. He said, keep quiet, this is a better pram. But humour is so necessary to our well-being, you know. If we realised how much we needed, we'd chase it more. We really would. It's imperative that we laugh. This fellow Hennessy was going to make his first parachute jump, and just before he was going to do the jump, he was having a final briefing by the instructor. And the instructor said, now, Hennessy, this is what you do. He said, first of all, you have to go up in the plane. Now, he said, when you're up about 6,000 feet, he said, I want you to jump out. And he said, seeing that it's your first parachute jump, he said, I don't want you to pull the ripcord until you're about 10 feet from the ground. Because he says, if it doesn't open, you won't have far to fall. You got to write that down. It's lovely, isn't it? These two fellas, Casey and Flanagan, they were fond of a game of golf. They were great sportsmen. One day they met in the street, and Casey said to Flanagan, he said, I had a funny dream last night. He said, I dreamt there was a knock on my door. He said, I got up, and outside the door, he says, well, the world-famous golfer Jack Nicklaus. He said, and he invited me out for a game of golf. He said, and I went out and I played golf with him, and I beat him. And Flanagan said, he said, that's funny. He said, you should have mentioned that. He said, because I had a dream last night, too. He said, I dreamt that I went home to my house, and two of the most beautiful ladies in the world were in my house. He said, Sophia Loren and Elizabeth Taylor. He says, and there I was with the two ladies. I couldn't entertain them on my own. And your man said, why didn't you phone me? He said, I did, but you were out playing golf with Jack Nicklaus. You know, we in Ireland refer to men from different counties as a Cork man, a Kerry man, a Sligo man, a Donegal man. You know, if he comes from that part of the country, that's what we say. He's a Kerry man or he's a Cork man. Anyway, this fella Murphy, he got a job, actually. Murphy got a job as the first mate on a ship, on a cruising ship. And one day the captain sent for me. He said, Murphy, I want you to proceed to cabin 36 and have the occupant who died during the night buried at sea. He said, yes, Captain. So he went away, and an hour later he came back and he said, Captain, I proceeded to cabin 26 and I had the occupant buried at sea. And the captain said, good God, I said, cabin 36, who was in 26? And Murphy said, a fella called Maloney from Kerry. And the captain said, was he dead? And Murphy said, well, he said he wasn't. He said, but you know these Kerry men, they're terrible liars. You got to write that down, it's a good one. A little bit of heaven fell from out the sky one day. It landed in Galway, and it is called Connemara, one of the jewels of the Emerald Isle, untouched by the so-called progress of our great big modern world today, which needs a lot of help, believe me. Anyway, my sister lives there. Life goes by quietly and peacefully. But there was a big circus in Galway last year, and this big elephant escaped from the circus, and they couldn't find it for 2 weeks. And do you know where it finished up? In my sister's back garden in Connemara. It did. And she went out to hang up the washing, and she saw it. She nearly died. Oh, she nearly died. She'd never seen the like of it. She rushed into her husband. She said, Pat, for God's sake, will you come out quick? There's a funny-looking animal in the garden, and he's picking up the potatoes with his tail. And her husband said, what's he doing with him? She said, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. Now, don't explain that to her. And God forgive us all for laughing at it. It's not a sin to laugh at that, honest to God. It's not a sin. It's only a sin if you take pleasure in it. You know, I stand up here every night. I never get over the joy and the happiness it brings me to hear people laugh. An hour ago, we didn't know each other. Now I feel we all know each other. There's a lot of warmth in this room tonight, and you know why that is? Because for a little while, we laugh together. And when we laugh, everything else is obliterated from our minds. No worries can get in there, no income tax, no mother-in-laws, nothing. We laughed together, and we forgot the world for an hour, and it's beautiful. Laughter is the food of the soul. We can't live without it. If we don't laugh, we disintegrate, as I say, and we die, slowly pine away. Everything we do in life is relative to laughter. To laugh is to love. To laugh is to understand. To laugh is to forgive. We must laugh. The laughter of children is beautiful, and a smile can be devastating. Let me tell you the meaning of a smile. It costs nothing. It creates much. It enriches those who receive without impoverishing those who give. It happens in a flash, and the memory of it sometimes lasts forever. There are none so rich that they can get along without it, and none so poor but are richer for its benefits. It creates happiness in the home, fosters goodwill in the business, and is the countersign of friends. It is rest to the weary, daylight to the discouraged, sunshine to the sad, and nature's best antidote for trouble. And yet, it cannot be begged, bought, borrowed, or stolen, for it is something that does no earthly good to anyone until it is given away. So if in the course of the day your friends may be too tired to give you a smile, then why don't you give them one of yours? Because nobody needs a smile more than those who have none left to give. Smile.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's star time. Jury's Hotel proudly presents Ireland's international comedian, Hal Roach.
and welcome to Jury's Irish Cabaret. Tonight, somebody's smoking turf. There's a little bit of Irish in everybody, and of course we Irish always enjoy a little joke on ourselves. That's why we live forever. When Irish eyes are smiling, they steal your heart away. And tonight I'm going to try and regale you with the simplicity and unpretentiousness of the humour here in the Emerald Isle. This fella Casey went to the doctor down in County Cork. He said, "Can you give me something for me wind?" And the doctor gave him a kite. Write it down. It's a good one. Write it down. Two fellas in a pub in Belfast talking, and one said to the other, he said, "What's new?" The other fella said, "There's good news and there's bad news." He said, "What's the bad news?" He said, "The bad news is that the English have landed on the moon." He said, "What's the good news?" He said, "All of them." Oh, dear God. Thank you. I come from Waterford City, where the lovely Crystal is made. There was 23 children in our family, and we always put my mother on a pedestal. We had to keep my father away from her. This fella Murphy joined the local dramatic society down in County Cork, and he got a part in a play. He had 2 words to say, "It is." That's all he had to say, and he was delighted. And for 2 weeks he was going around rehearsing, talking to himself. "It is, it is, it is, it is. It is." On the night of the play, he walked onto the stage and he said, "Is it?" This fella Casey was the Irish Evel Knievel, but he was different. Anything everybody else did in the stunts, he wanted to do it in reverse. Even as a child, he was different. When he was 10 years old, he ran away from the circus to join an orphanage. But anyway, different. His last attempt at a stunt was only brilliant. Can you imagine? There was 36 parked motorcycles, and he decided he was going to go over them in a bus. And he would have made it, but halfway over, somebody rang the bell. Write it down. It's a good one. It's a good one. Murphy went to the doctor the other day. He said to the doctor, "What's good for insomnia?" And the doctor said, "A good night's sleep." But anyway, the doctor examined him, and he said to Casey, "I can't seem to find anything wrong with you." He said, "I'll have to put it down to drink." And Casey said, "That's all right." He said, "Doctor, I'll come back another day when you're sober." It's a good one. Anyway, the doctor told him to walk 10 miles a day. And a week goes by and he phoned the doctor. He said, "I'm 200 miles from home. What do I do now?" Simple, God knows. Casey found himself one night in London, by the way, very late, 12:30 at night, and he was down in the underground, the subway station, very late at night. So he walked along to the escalator, and there's a big sign, a big notice on the escalator, and it says, "Dogs must be carried on the escalator." And he said, "My God, where am I going to find a dog at this hour of the night?" I love children's stories as well. I love kids. Oh, yes. This little Catholic boy said to this little Jewish boy, "Our parish priest knows much more than your rabbi." And the Jewish kid said, "Of course he does, because you tell him everything." I like that. His Holiness Pope John Paul, when he came to Ireland, with this great message of peace for all of us, by the way, not only for Ireland, but indeed all the world. But of all the great attributes that this man possesses, strength is one of them. Strength in his face, but also his great sense of humour. I don't think we'll ever forget his great sense of humour here in Ireland. I understand that when he went to Maynooth, to the college, all the religious were lining up to be introduced to him, and there was a little discussion, you know, about feasibility or even imagination as to what nationality our Lord could also have been, you know, just as a bit of fun. Some of the cardinals and the priest said he could have been French, he could have been Italian, he could have been, you know, he could have been Polish, he could have been anything. So they decided that they'd ask the Pope himself. I mean, after all, he is infallible. So when His Holiness came in, they said, "Your Holiness, we're just as a bit of fun discussing the possibility of what nationality our Lord really might have been." And the Pope said, "He was Irish." And they said, "How do you make out he was Irish?" And the Pope said, "Well, who else would be 33, single, and living with his mother?" Lovely. In America, You call it the welfare. In Ireland, it's the labour exchange. Same thing. Visualise the scene. The clerk is sitting behind the desk interviewing Murphy, who is applying for some assistance. Now, the clerk said, Mr. Murphy, tell me something about your assets. What visible means of support do you have at the moment? Are you enjoying? And Murphy said, I have 500,000 shares in the Texaco Oil Company doing well. I have 300,000 shares in Guinness's brewery booming, and lots of stocks and bonds and all that sort of thing. And the clerk said, good. Do you have a house? And Murphy said, I have 4 houses, fully furnished and paid for on the outskirts of Dublin. And the clerk said, good. Have you got a car? And Murphy said, I have a new Mercedes-Benz outside the door. And the clerk said, you're joking. And Murphy said, well, you started it. Donegal. You know, people live to great ages in Donegal. Some of them 105 years old, 110 years old. My God, we'll have to shoot them all, we will. They live to this great age because of the fresh air up there. The lovely fresh air in Donegal. It's so invigorating that the caretaker of the local graveyard has to go around every morning with a big stick. Come on, lie down there, boys. Come on now, lie down, lie down. We Irish, though, we have a great sense of humour, but we're as cute as the devil, you know that. We always were cute. We could buy and sell you, honest to God. Well, I tell you, Henry Ford's parents were born in Ireland. Did you know that, down in Cork? And many years ago, Henry Ford came to visit the birthplace of his parents in County Cork, and when the lads in the town heard he was in town, they weren't missing a chance like that. So they all converged on the hotel, and they said, Mr. Henry Ford, we welcome you to the birthplace of your parents here in Cork. He said, you are the world's greatest inventor, the world's greatest industrialist, the world's greatest philanthropist, and we welcome you here to Ireland. He said, by the way, we're starting to build a new hospital here in the city, and we thought in honour of your parents, you'd like to make a donation to the hospital. So Henry Ford said, of course, and he sat down and he wrote out a cheque for £5,000. The next day, in the Cork papers, the newspapers read headlines, Henry Ford donates £50,000 to the new hospital. Of course, the lads converged on him that evening again and said, we apologise about the mistake in the newspaper, but tomorrow morning we'll have it rectified back to the 5,000. Oh, we're as cute as the devil. So Henry Ford said, wait a minute. He said, how much is this hospital costing? And they said £50,000. So he said, give me back the cheque. So he took back the cheque, tore it up. He wrote a new cheque for £50,000. And he said, I'll give you this cheque under one condition, that the inscription over the hospital will be the one I have in mind. They said they didn't care what inscription it was. And if you go to Cork, ladies and gentlemen, you can still see it today, and it reads, I came among you and you took me in. Write it down. You're lovely people, you're lovely people. Casey went to the dentist last week. He said, I'm very worried. All my teeth are turning yellow. What can I do? And the dentist said, wear a brown tie. Tie. I like it. Murphy went to the bank to have a cheque cashed. And the teller said, can you identify yourself? And Murphy took a mirror from his pocket, looked at it and said, yes, it's definitely me. But we Irish, as I say, like a little laugh at ourselves. A lot of nonsense talk today about ethnic humour. There's nothing wrong with ethnic humour if you can enjoy a little joke on yourselves. In good taste, of course. We Irish will live forever because of our sense of humour. I say, like a little laugh at ourselves. A lot of nonsense. But one of the funniest little jokes I've heard of in Ireland, in a little village for a long time, is Murphy and the husband, they bought a little house, you see, and it was near the railway station, but it was very noisy, particularly when the trains were going by. The house used to shake a lot. So one day the landlord visited the house, and Mrs. Murphy was trying to explain to him they were going through a bad time with this train business, you see. Now, she said, sometimes when I'm in bed and the train goes by, it nearly knocks me out of the bed. So the landlord said, no, you've got to be exaggerating here. I know now it's not good, but it can't be that bad. Well, she said, I'm telling you now, there's a train due any minute, she says, and I'm going to lie on the bed and you'll see for yourself. As a matter of fact, she said, now why don't you just lie down here beside me and then you'll experience what I'm trying to tell you. So the landlord lay down beside her, and didn't Murphy walk in the door. He said, what's going on here? And the landlord said, you won't believe this, but we're waiting for a train.